Vibhuti is the ash which is prepared from burning the cow dung. Sometimes we get the Vibhuti from the Homakunda, that is the burning ashes from the fire, sacrifice, from the yajna. When we do a lot of ahutis, that means we are giving the oblations with ghee and other ingredients. You are praying to the God, and whatever is burnt out is left. So that is the Vibhuti. Vibhuti is called the Vibhutir Bhutir Aishwaryam. In our tradition, Vibhuti is regarded as one of the finest forms of wealth. It is preserved sacred, with sacred feeling. Parameshwara, Lord Shiva smears the Vibhuti. So for a Shiva Bhakta, having the Vibhuti, because we have got 3 or 4 instances of Bhasma Dharana, Vibhuti Dharana. Every day a brahmachari after the Homa or the Grihastha after the Homa, they will take out a small pinch of Vibhuti and apply it on the forehead. We say that smearing of this Vibhuti, it is nothing but the prasada or the leftover of Yajneshwara. As we have performed all these yajnas all these days or all this time, we want to have a small token of appreciation from the deities. So this is a token of that appreciation. That is why Agner Bhasmasi, Agner Purishamasi. Saying this, we smear this. And when we have the token of appreciation from the deities, what is the benefit that should constitute, that would occur to us? We say, Medhavi Bhujasam. Let me be blessed with good intellect, Tejasvi with bodily temperament, Varchasvi with wonderful charishma, Aura, Brahma Varchasi, Ayushman, let me be blessed with long life. With all these wishes in mind, we smear the Vibhuti. When we take the prasada of Shiva as the Vibhuti as prasadam, then we deem that we are indeed blessed by Lord Shiva. That is one of the meanings of Bhasma Dharana. Jai Gurudatta.
Each kid should come up with one question and answer.
Let us not force a question. If they have, let us encourage them. We don't want to drive them out.
Why do we have so many gods in Hinduism?
Can you repeat that one more time, please?
That's one of the questions everybody asks. Yeah, because you are comparing Hinduism, Christianity, other religions, right?
Can you say your name, please?
My name is Karthik.
Shri Karthik wants to know why we have multiple godheads in our tradition. Monothesis and polythesis. This is the philosophical terms used in many philosophies. Is there really one God, or do we have many other attributes? In reality, we have only one God. You might have observed that the children have sung one first. In the first item, the last hymn shloka was Ananta Namna Parishobhitoyah Ananta Rupeda Virajitascha Ananta Viryadi Gunaih Prapurnaha Tam Sachidananda Vibhum Vrajamaha. You might have heard this sentence. Ekam Sat Vipraha Bahudha Vadanti. There is only one, but the learned souls engage him, refer to him in different ways. That is the meaning. When someone says this, we can give explanation in 2 or 3 methods. The first one is, it is not true that we have multiple godheads. We have different names to refer with. But in essence, we have only one God who is universal, omnipresent, all pervading, omniscient. There is no second thought about it. Because the theory of Vedanta, the principle of Veda, which is spelled out in the Vedanta, it very clearly gives us the synopsis. There is only one. That is none but you. He is all pervading. So that is the ultimate philosophical truth. Then again comes, okay, if that is true, why are we having these many references? Other religions have just God, but you are having many other these things. If we really take that God is a nominal word, you probably, if you have gone through some biblical literature, you might have heard of other terms also. Yehovah is one word. And they have many other words, many other translations or references. Let me take an example. Mr. Karthik is a person. Do you have kids here?
Yeah.
Yes. Your kids call you father. Your wife calls you husband. Your parents will call you son. And your brothers might call you brother. Sisters also brother. Or your uncles will call you nephew. So, being only one person, your colleagues will call you friend. And you will have so many other references. But you are only one. That is not only that. Being just one personality, it is actually being referred by various other names. Your attire also changes from time to time. When you were a kid, you were wearing shorts. After that, you started wearing pants. When you go to a party, you might go with a different attire. When in office, you will wear a suit. On a beach day, you will be just content with a minimal this thing. In your bedroom, you will have a different suit, different attire. An attire for each occasion. And if I see you for the first time, I might mean that, oh, this person always wears a suit. One of your friends might like this attire of you more and more. Hey, I like this, you please always wear this. I want to see you like this. Probably your father might want you to see in a veshti and dhoti, something like this. Or probably a person like me always want to see you in a different attire. Probably your wife wants you to see in a suit or something else. So, the liking of each person differs from occasion to occasion. But essentially the personality remains the same. That is the meaning of Ananta Namna Parishobhitoyaha. See, a limited personality, someone like you and me, if we ourselves can don so many hats while performing so many roles, and we are being referred with so many names from occasion to occasion, think of that Almighty who might appear to various persons on different platforms, different perspectives, how many views he can generate. Similarly, we have one Godhood with to our likings, we are having many. If you go to North India, we have a different type of decoration. The same deity is called Durga Mayi. The same deity is called Chandi elsewhere. So it's all our perceptions and our likings which are making us thinking differently, but essentially God remains the same. Jai Guru Datta.
What is the difference between Upanishads and Vedas?
What is the difference? Karthik again has a question. Upanishad, what is Upanishad and what is Vedas? Vedas, you all know that there are 4 Vedas we have. Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda and Atharva Veda. Even on one of my previous interactions I had explained about it.
Can you explain that also?
Yes. Essentially the mantras are of 3 variants. One which has a fixed meter. For example, let us say Shuklambara Dharam Vishnum Shashivarnan Chaturbhujam Prasanna Vadanam Dhyajet Sarva Vignopa Shantayet. If you count the syllables in each of them, it is 32. That means it has a fixed meter. The mantras in fixed meter are called the padya. Padya. In other words, it is rik. The Veda which has the maximum number of riks or the padyas is called Rig Veda. Similarly, when you say Namaste Astu Bhagavan Vishweshwaraya Mahadevaya Trigambakaya Tripurantakaya Trikagnikalaya Kalagnirudraya Nilakantaya Mrityunjayaya Sarveshwaraya Sadashivaya Shriman Mahadevaya Namaha. When you say this, there is no count, there is no limitation to the number of syllables, letters. That is the aparimita. It is not mita, it is not limited, it is unlimited. That unlimited variation is called gadya, or in other words, it is yajus. The Veda with the maximum number of yajus mantras, yajur mantras is called the Yajur Veda. And when you apply the same thing while singing, it becomes the Gana. This Gana is called the Sama. Shiva Shiva Shankara Mama Sharanam. What will happen? It is being prolonged, improvised. That is the Gana, that is the Sama. The Rik mantras and the Yajus mantras used in different contexts are called the, and which are envisioned by the Seer Atharva, are called the Atharva Veda. In a sense, there are only three variants, that is Rik, Yajus, Sama. We should always remember this. When someone asks how many Vedas are, what is the difference between each Veda? This is the difference. When you have the measured, metered poems, that is Rig Veda. When you don't have the unmetered, unmeasured hymns, they are the Yajus. When we have the singing type of hymns, it is Sama Veda. Vedanta is the last part of Veda. Vedanta is the last part of Veda. This is called the Upanishad. The last part of the Veda is mostly it is philosophical in nature. So that part is called the Vedanta, which is another name for Upanishad.
What is other one?
I told you, the mantras envisioned by the sage Atharva, Bhrigu and Angiras are designated as the Atharva Veda. They are actually in nature, in essence, they are Rig mantras and Yajur mantras only. Please go ahead.
My name is Diana. I'm from Chicago. I'm not Indian. I'm from Guatemala. I was born there. I grew up in Chicago. And before I found out about Swamiji, learned about Swamiji, I was studying the Bhagavad Gita.
Take the mic next time.
Come, friend.
Let everyone benefit from your experience.
May I sit down?
No problem. Please be comfortable as you like. No, there is a speaker here. You have to come this way. Please come.
No, come this way, come.
I'm not shy, I just don't like attention.
It's not a
And so I was studying the Bhagavad Gita and Patanjali's Yoga Sutras just because I became interested in it. I went to India for the first time in 2009 and I just wanted to learn. And then I learned of Swamiji and things changed. And I started reading his books instead, biography and different books. And for me personally, in my understanding, everyone's bhakti yoga is different based on what you understand for you. And for me, I understand that my devotion is there, but I am the type of person that likes to have things defined in a certain way in terms of what should be my practice. And so my struggle is with the word should, because I think it's with the word should.
What?
Should. S-H-O-U-L-D. Because should means it should be this.
What should you do?
So that's my struggle with that word, because I want to know what my practice should be before, after reading Swamiji and learning Kriya Yoga and taking it. It was every day, 4 a.m., Kriya Yoga, reading, praying, whatever. And then it went away, or I didn't do it. And so I just want to know now that I'm back in the U.S., now that I'm married, I'm having a householder lifestyle, which I never thought I would have. and in part of a family, a culture that does not accepts me for my beliefs, doesn't necessarily believe in the same thing. What sort of practice can I have to maintain that strength in my devotion? Because sometimes it is a little bit difficult and lonely.
Mrs. Diana would like to know what should be the practice of a householder.
Yeah.
Because the gurus give us many tenets which might not be practical in daily life, at least as per our convenience and understanding. So in such circumstances, when the family does not support her practices and beliefs, what should she do? Does she have to forsake the advice of the guru or her beliefs, or leave the family life, which is not possible obviously? What should be the conclusive advice? You have started wonderfully with the reference of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti is devotion. Okay? It can manifest in many forms. Sage Narada or Shandilya have given us 9 forms of Bhakti. You can have the list from internet itself. Navavidha Bhakti. Swamiji has spoken about this Bhakti Yoga many times. It is true that the practices that are prevalent and that are observed by ascetics cannot be repeated by a householder. That's true. That's why when I said that the principle remains the same, though the exterior nature might appear differently, the principle remains the same. Let us have the first thing. What is the definition of bhakti given by Narada? They are also called the Shandilya Bhakti Sutras also. Nomenclature does not matter to us. The content matters. Sa paranurakti Ishvare. Sa para anurakti Ishvare. If you don't expect anything in return and still have the utmost affection to the Almighty, that constitutes bhakti. Without expecting anything in return, if you have the mental affection, it need not be exhibited if someone is objecting to this. If you can still maintain that affection towards the God, that itself is bhakti. That itself is enough you to steer. When you get the most opportune time in life, certainly God will find you a very good way. Because let me give some examples in my own life. I have one uncle and one aunt who were pakka atheists. They were not agnostics, they were atheists. They never believed. My mother used to brainwash them, she used to cajole them, she used to invite them. They said, out of your reverence or affection, we might come there. But I still remember one of my uncles, he came all the way to Swamiji. He stood outside prayer hall. When Swamiji was facing like this, he was just standing like this. He said, no, for you I have come. I have never come for this Swamiji. You don't believe that he served one of the temples as Archaka for 25 years after that. That's a different case. But when you have the utmost affection towards the God without expecting anything, that itself is the wonderful achievement. But it is true that you will get some occasions when you can practice on your own. See, there are 2 aspects in our life. One is the exterior and the other one is interior. Bahiranga, Antaranga. Exterior is Bahiranga. Bahiranga means Anga is the body. One which happens outside the body is Bahiranga. One which happens inside the body is Manasika. So the Manasika, the mental practices, they can go on without any inhibitions. And Swamiji has given us wonderful examples. When you have your children, or when you have your husband or any in-laws, anyone around you, you try to see the divinity in them. Just for the reason that they have opposed your external actions, don't hate them. No, I mean to say you are not hating. I know that. Just for the reason that they are opposing your external actions, don't hate them or don't be averse to them. You see the good in them. So this is one of the ways to draw them to your path. Ultimately they may swerve around, but ultimately they will come to their path. Because the necessity of bhakti will only be felt when you are in an adversity. It is actually painful, but it is always true. Unless there are adverse conditions, you will never appreciate the necessity. We see many children who are doing exceptionally well in their colleges and schools, or many persons who are earning so much without any difficulty. They never feel the necessity of any god or any divinity, because they think everything is of their own making. When they run through the conditions of adversity, then they will realize what they have missed all along. That realization is enough for us to get steered towards the divinity. So you need not worry. The principle of unexpected affection, without any expectance, if you have that devotion towards the God, in whatever way, if you have taken Kriya Yoga classes, if Swamiji has given you a mantra, that itself is enough. You need not chant the mantra very loudly so that everyone can hear. You just chant it inside the mind. No one would object if you sit quietly for a few minutes. No one would object. If you start chanting very loudly, then people might object. But if you are just chanting in your mind, no one would object. You will certainly find those times peaceful times. You will certainly enjoy them. Jai Guru Bhakta.
Follow-up question. Who is Swamiji and why is he called Avadhuta? How to approach a Guru?
Please repeat this on mic.
Jai Guru Datta. My name is Shekhar Devarapalli. My question is, who is Swamiji and why is he referred as Avadhuta, and how do we approach a Guru and why do we need a Guru?
He said actually it's a follow-up question. It's a main question only. The answering these questions could consume all our time. Okay, anyhow, they are very important questions and we cannot ignore them. Swamiji in this case is our Sadguru, Shri Ganapati Satchidananda Swamiji. Many of you have known him. You have seen his pictures. He is the one who has inspired us a lot. A lot more can be found about him on the internet. So I did not repeat all these things. Briefly saying, his guru was Mata Jayalakshmi, who was his yoga guru and who was the first teacher to him. And she has given 12 commandments. They are called the Dvadasha Suktis. Swamiji always follows these commandments in letter and spirit. The Dvadasha Suktis, I think the Bharadatta children should learn to recite these Dvadasha Suktis and give some pictorial depictions of these Suktis and present them to Swamiji when he comes next. Okay. Swamiji's father was Narasimha Shastri and he attained the Avadhuta Diksha approximately when he was 21 years or 24 years in Sri Shailam, a famous pilgrim place in Andhra Pradesh, which is a Shakti Pitha as well as the Jyotirlinga Kshetra. The Diksha of Avadhuta, the Avadhuta Diksha is little different from what we come across other seers, other sages or monks. It is little different. As you are aware, there are 4 ashramas for each individual. There are 4 ashramas: Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyasa. Since we wanted to know what is